The Law of One. Book 5. Fragment 2. Session 6. January 24, 1981. Jim, the following material in Session 6 concerns the basic requirement for the raw contact, that is, harmony. During the 106 sessions with Ra, there were only 3 people who ever attended a Ra session besides the 3 of us, and in each case it was Ra's recommendation that each entity needed not only to have the appropriate attitude in its personal means of seeking, but that each person needed to be in harmony with each of us before attending any session. In Tom's case, this was achieved by Don's explaining to Tom the meaning that the Bible, candle, incense, and chalice of water held for us as triggering mechanisms or signals to our subconscious minds that a session was about to take place, and that from all levels of our being we should begin the process of purifying our desires to serve others above all else and to surround ourselves with a joy-filled light of praise and thanksgiving. The harmony that this process produced among our group, then, was much as a musical chord with which those of Ra could blend their vibrations, and upon that harmonious blend of vibrations information of a metaphysical nature could be transmitted by being drawn to those which sought it. Carla, Tom is one of the members of Laurel Research's spiritual family who attended our meditation group's Sunday meetings for some years. It is impossible to say how many members have come to our sessions over the years since 1962, when we began. Like many of these dear souls, he has kept in touch, although his personal path has taken him elsewhere. We have always attempted to tune our circle before we begin to meditate together, so Tom was perfectly clear on what we needed. That altar, with its Christian accoutrements, may well puzzle some who think that it takes a New Age channel to produce New Age information. Not so for me, unless one counts Jesus Christ as a New Age channel himself. I was a cradle Anglican, and have attended Episcopal churches my whole life. That those of Ra worked with these deeply ingrained biases within me is, to me, a signal characteristic of this unique source. I felt loved, accepted, and cherished by having these items placed near me, and that they thought this out was a constant blessing during this contact. Session 6, January 24, 1981. Questioner, I would like to ask if it is possible for Tom to attend one of these sessions tomorrow. Are you familiar with the entity, Tom? Ra, I am Ra. This mind-body spirit complex, sound vibration Tom, is acceptable. We caution you to instruct this entity in the frame of mind and various appurtenances which it must understand before it is conducted into the circle. Questioner, I'm not quite sure what you mean by appurtenances. Ra, I was referring to the symbolic objects which trigger this instrument's distortions towards love or light. The placement and loving acceptance of them by all present is important in the nurturing of this instrument. Therefore, the appurtenances involved must be described and their presence explained in your own words of teacher learning, for you have the proper attitude for the required results. Questioner, the only question that I have is that I will assume that since Leonard was here when you first made contact, that it is suitable for him to be here as well as Tom. Ra, this is correct and completes the number of those at this time able to come who are suitable. Again, remember the instructions given for the preparation of the vibratory sound complex, Tom. The Law of One, Book 5. Fragment 3, Session 8. January 26, 1981. Jim, Early in the raw contact we received answers to our questions which fell into a controversial portion of our third density illusion. Almost everyone, at some point within the study of the paranormal, spends some time being fascinated by the so-called conspiracy theories, which have generally to do with the supposedly unseen groups and individuals who are said to be the real powers behind governments and their activities in the world today. Such theories usually hold that the news reports that we hear and read concerning politics, economics, the military, and so forth are but the tip of a very large iceberg that has mainly to do with various schemes for world domination and which function through the secret activities of this small, elite group of human beings and their alien allies. The following information falls into this category and resulted from a follow-up question Don asked about UFOs and their sources. You will note Don's incredulous attitude throughout this portion of his questioning. It was our decision to remove this information from Book 1 of the Law of One because we felt it to be entirely unimportant and of a transient nature, since knowing it adds nothing to one's ability or desire to seek the truth and the nature of the evolutionary process, whether the information is true or not. In fact, knowing and continuing to seek this kind of information can become a major stumbling block to one's spiritual journey because it removes one's attention from the eternal truths which may serve anyone's journey at any time and places it upon that which is only of fleeting interest and of little use spiritually. Concentrating on conspiracy theories and their participants tends to reinforce the illusion of separation and ignores the love that binds all things as one being. If we had continued to pursue this particular line of questioning, or any other line of questioning of a transient nature, we would soon have lost the contact with those of Ra because, as Ra mentioned in the very first session, Ra communicated with us through a narrow band of vibration or wavelength. Through various clues that Ra gave us when Dawn asked about the alignments at the end of each session, we were able to determine that this narrow band meant that only information of the purest and most precise nature concerning the process of the evolution of mind, body, and spirit could be successfully transmitted on a sustainable basis through our instrument. To ask Ra questions of a transient nature would be like trying to run a finely tuned engine on crude petroleum. Many groups become fascinated with transient information of a specific, mundane nature and have their information polluted by negative entities who gradually replace the positive entities that began their contact. Pursuing information of this kind is like moving the dial on your radio so that you end up with another station altogether from the one with which you began. This change in desire for the kind of information that the group seeks from its contact is the signal to that contact that what it has to offer is no longer desired, and the law of free will requires that only hints of this detuning process be given to the group so that all choices that the group makes are totally a product of its free will. When a group continues to seek the transient information, the positive contact gives hints here and there that such information is not of importance, but when the group persists in seeking this kind of information, the positive contact, in order to observe the free will of the group, must slowly withdraw and is then eventually replaced by a negative contact which is only too happy to give this kind of information, but with less desire for accuracy and with maximal desire to remove the group from the ranks of those who serve others. When the group has been discredited by false information such as dates of future disasters which are publicized by the group and then do not occur, then the negative entities have been successful in removing the power of the group's light and have gathered it for themselves. We still feel that this information is totally unimportant, and the only reason that we include it now is to show how easy it is for a group to get off the track, shall we say, and to lose the focus of desire for that which is important and that with which the group began, the desire to serve others by gathering information which may aid in the evolution of mind, body, and spirit. 10,000 years from now it will not matter one whit who did what to whom on this tiny speck of whirling dust. All that will matter is that love may be found at any time in every person and particle of the one creation, or any illusion thereof. Hopefully information gained through any effort such as the raw contact will help some other third-density entities to discover more of that truth and to move one step further on their evolutionary journey to the one creator. Carla, all I can add to this is a plea to all official sources. We do not know anything, we are not in on any conspiracies, and please don't tap our telephones again. When Dawn and I joined Andrija Puharic for a Mind Link in 1977, we caught the attention of some agency who played havoc with our telephone system. And how utterly without use to listen into our converse. Mystics seldom plot. We honestly don't care about this stuff, and just stumbled into it by accident. I'd like to point out the way those of Ra seem here somewhat off balance compared to their usual steady selves. It is subtle, but easy to see the opening to each answer is normally I am Ra. Several times in this fragment, however, that signature is missing. The contact was going slightly out of tune here, I think, due to the information's transient nature. Session 8, January 26, 1981. Questioner: there was a portion of the material from yesterday which I will read where you say there is a certain amount of landing taking place. Some of these landings are of your own people, some are of the group known to you as Orion. My first question is, what did you mean that some of the landings are of your peoples? Ra, I am Ra. Your peoples have, at this time or space present, the technological achievement, if you would call it that, of being able to create and fly the shape and type of craft known to you as unidentified flying objects. Unfortunately for the social memory complex vibratory rate of your peoples, these devices are not intended for the service of mankind, but for potential destructive use. This further muddles the vibratory nexus of your social memory complex, causing a situation where neither those oriented towards serving others nor those oriented towards serving self can gain the energy or power which opens the gates to intelligent infinity for the social memory complex. This in turn causes the harvest to be small. Questioner: are these craft that are from our peoples from what we call planes that are not incarnate at this time? Where are they based? Ra, I am Ra. These of which we spoke are of third density and are part of the so-called military complex of various of your people's societal divisions or structures. The bases are varied. There are bases, as you would call them, undersea in your southern waters near the Bahamas as well as in your Pacific seas in various places close to your Chilean borders on the water. There are bases upon your moon, as you call this satellite, which are at this time being reworked. There are bases which move about your lands. There are bases, if you would call them that, in your skies. These are the bases of your peoples, very numerous and, as we have said, potentially destructive. Questioner: where do the people who operate these craft come from? Are they affiliated with any nation on Earth? What is their source? Ra, these people come from the same place as you or I. They come from the Creator. As you intend the question, in its shallower aspect, These people are those in your and other selves governments responsible for what you would term national security. Questioner: am I to understand then that the United States has these craft in undersea bases? Ra: I am Ra. You are correct. Questioner: how did the United States learn the technology to build these craft? Ra: I am Ra. There was a Minderbodier spirit complex known to your people by the vibratory sound complex, Nicola. This entity departed the illusion, and the papers containing the necessary understandings were taken by Minderbodier spirit complexes serving your security of National Divisional Complex. Thus your people became privy to the basic technology. In the case of those Minderbodier spirit complexes which you call Russians, the technology was given from one of the Confederation in an attempt, approximately 27 of your years ago, to share information and bring about peace among your peoples. The entities giving this information were in error, but we did many things at the end of this cycle in attempts to aid your harvest, from which we learned the folly of certain types of aid. That is a contributing factor to our more cautious approach at this date, even as the need is power upon power greater, and your people's call is greater and greater. Questioner: I'm puzzled by these craft which have undersea bases. Is this technology sufficient to overshadow all other armaments? Do we have the ability to just fly in these craft, or are they just craft for transport? What is the basic mechanism of their power source? It's really hard to believe is what I'm saying. Ra: I am Ra. The craft are perhaps misnamed in some instances. It would be more appropriate to consider them as weaponry. The energy used is that of the field of electromagnetic energy which polarizes the Earth's sphere. The weaponry is of two basic kinds, that which is called by your people psychotronic and that which is called by your people's particle beam. The amount of destruction which is contained in this technology is considerable, and the weapons have been used in many cases to alter weather patterns and to enhance the vibratory change which engulfs your planet at this time. Questioner: how have they been able to keep this a secret? Why aren't these craft in use for transport? Ra: the governments of each of your societal division illusions desire to refrain from publicity so that the surprise may be retained in case of hostile action from what your peoples call enemies. Questioner: how many of these craft does the United States have? Ra: I am Ra. The United States has 573 at this time. They are in the process of adding to this number. Questioner: what is the maximum speed of one of these craft? Ra: I am Ra. The maximum speed of these craft is equal to the Earth energy squared. This field varies. The limit is approximately 1/2 the light speed, as you would call it. This is due to imperfections in design. Questioner: would this type of craft come close to solving many of the energy problems as far as transport goes? Ra: I am Ra. The technology your peoples possess at this time is capable of resolving each and every limitation which plagues your social memory complex at this present nexus of experience. However, the concerns of some of your beings with distortions towards what you would call powerful energy cause these solutions to be withheld until the solutions are so needed that those with the distortion can then become further distorted in the direction of power. Questioner: you also said that some of the landings at this time were of the Orion Group. Why did the Orion Group land here? What is their purpose? Ra: I am Ra. Their purpose is conquest, unlike those of the Confederation who wait for the calling. The so-called Orion group calls itself to conquest. Questioner, specifically, what do they do when they land? Ra, there are two types of landings. In the first, entities among your peoples are taken on their craft and programmed for future use. There are 2 or 3 levels of programming. First, the level that will be discovered by those who do research. Second, a triggering program. Third, a second, and most deep triggering program crystallizing the entity, thereby rendering it lifeless and useful as a kind of beacon. This is a form of landing. The second form is that of landing beneath the Earth's crust, which is entered from water. Again, in the general area of your South American and Caribbean areas and close to the so-called Northern Pole. The bases of these people are underground. Questioner, the most startling information that you have given me, which I must admit that I'm having difficulty believing, is that the United States has 573 craft of the type which you described. How many people of United States designation are aware of these craft, including those who operate them? Ra, I am Ra. The number of your peoples varies, for there are needs to communicate at this particular time or space nexus, so that the number is expanding at this time. The approximate number is 1,500. It is only approximate, for as your illusory time or space continuum moves from present to present at this nexus, many are learning. Questioner, where are these craft constructed? Ra, these craft are constructed one by one in 2 locations, in the desert or arid regions of your so-called New Mexico and in the desert or arid regions of your so-called Mexico, both installations being under the ground. Questioner, am I to believe that the United States actually has a manufacturing plant in Mexico? Ra, I am Ra. I spoke thusly. May I, at this time, reiterate that this type of information is very shallow and of no particular consequence compared to the study of the law of one. However, we carefully watch these developments in hopes that your peoples are able to be harvested in peace. Questioner, I am totally aware that this line of questioning is of totally no consequence at all, but this particular information is so startling to me that it makes me question your validity on this. Up until this point I was in agreement with everything you had said. This is very startling to me. It just does not seem possible to me that this secret could have been kept for 27 years, and that we are operating these craft. I apologize for my attitude, but I thought that I would be very honest. It is unbelievable to me that we would operate a plant in Mexico, outside of the United States, to build these craft. Maybe I'm mistaken. These craft are physical craft built by physical people? Could I go get in one and ride in one? Is that correct? Ra, I am Ra. This is incorrect. You could not ride one. The United States, as you call your society divisional complex, creates these as a type of weapon. Questioner, there are no occupants then? No pilot, shall I say? Ra, I am Ra. This is correct. Questioner, how are they controlled? Ra, I am Ra. They are controlled by computer from a remote source of data. Questioner, why do we have a plant in Mexico? Ra, I am Ra. The necessity is both for dryness of the ground and for a near total lack of population. Therefore, your so-called government and the so-called government of your neighboring geographical vicinity arranged for an underground installation. The government officials who agreed did not know the use to which their land would be put, but thought it a governmental research installation for use in what you would call bacteriological warfare. Questioner: is this the type of craft that Dan Fry was transported in? Ra: I am Ra. The one known as Daniel was, in thought form, transported by Confederation thought form vehicular illusion in order to give this mind-body or spirit complex data so that we might see how this type of contact aided your people in the uncovering of the intelligent infinity behind the illusion of limits. Questioner: the reason that I have questioned you so much and so carefully about the craft which you say the United States government operates is that if we include this in the book it will create numerous problems. It is something that I am considering leaving out of the book entirely, or I am going to have to question you in considerable detail about it. It's difficult to even question in this area, but I would like to ask a few more questions about it with the possible option of leaving it in the book. What is the diameter of the craft which the United States has? Ra: I am Ra. I suggest that this be the last question for this session. We will speak as you deem fit in further sessions, asking you to be guided by your own discernment only. The approximate diameter, given several model changes, is 23 of your feet, as you measure.